I'm not turning off the AC, by the way. It's too hot.
Oh, yeah, that's okay.
That's not happening.
Thank you.
People are just going to have to deal with it. It's not that bad. I actually forgot to turn it off for one thing, and I thought it was going to be a problem, but it was not.
Good.
So, this is Hoot and Review. I'm Jared.
I'm Jenna.
And there we go.
What matters is what you like, not what you are like. Books, records, films, these things matter. Call me shallow. It's the fucking truth.
So, I don't. There is a lot of stuff. Where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about Italy first?
Okay. I was, let's talk about Italy. I'm going to write something for Java because I went to the Biennale for 2 days and it was amazing, but I don't know if it was what I was expecting. I don't want to say it was disappointing. It just wasn't what I expected. So, do you know much about the Venice Biennale?
I do not.
Okay. This was the tail end of my trip, so I'm telling you out of chronology, but not a big deal. So I'll start with the art because that's where... I wish that I had more time in Venice because we were there for the Biennale. The Biennale kind of consumed my time, and that's too bad because Venice as a city looks amazing, but I really only had one night to scoot around on the Vaporettos and get off at a couple stops with my friend and find dinner because mostly we were at the main site of the Venice Biennale, which is called the Giardini, and then they have this extension site called the Arsenale, and they're both... in both areas, there's a giant building that's sort of operated as a group show with selections from a lot of different countries. And then at the Giardini, that's where they have those famous pavilions. So each of the pavilions is like a small gallery that's dedicated to a country.
Okay.
So like you'll be walking through and there's one for like Switzerland and Japan and then South Korea and then next to it Canada and Great Britain and France and blah, 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 name all the countries that you can think of.
Okay.
Almost all of them have a pavilion or some kind of presence at the Biennale. So the countries decide if they're going to give over their space to one featured artist or if they're going to pick a selection. So I didn't see more than 3 artists from a given country in each pavilion, but it was really interesting to see the variety of different ways these countries used their gallery space because it went way above and beyond just the, like the 4 white walls. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some of the galleries did that very traditional presentation, but a lot of them, like we went into Australia and I don't remember who the artist is. I should have taken better notes. They'd used the whole space, and Australia's pavilion, by the way, is really interesting because it just looks like a big black block that fell out of space. Like
a monolith, like from 2001 kind of thing?
Yeah, or like Star Trek, the Borg thing.
Oh, sure,
their ship.
Yeah.
But not any of the, like,
metally
pipes.
bits?
Yeah, just the black... 2001's probably a better... Yeah, a big black cube. That's what it looks like. So I'm assuming that means it's a newer structure because some of the buildings look very old, like they've been there since the 40s or 50s, and I'm sure that's true of a lot of the European countries at least. Anyway, Australia, we went inside and there's red carpet and this dugout, like those sunken living rooms from like the 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
You could sit in there and this plush red carpet, and then there were 3 video screens and there was a video projection. Well, there were different ones on all 3 screens, but they were coordinated, and it was different music groups and percussion and dancing troops and a lot of different groups of people that represent different segments of Australian society and culture. So that was nice to watch. And then I liked Belgium's. Again, I don't remember who the artist was, but he had these mechanical figurines and they looked kind of like frumpy puppets. And they were, a lot of them dressed in contemporary clothing, like Fila soccer shorts and Adidas shoes and then, whatever. But then some of them were from old Belgium, like the 1500s or 1600s, and they were dressed as, like, one guy was a chef and he was rolling out dough, and one woman was spinning ceramics on a pot, and they were all automated mannequins. Okay. So they would, if you stayed there and waited, they would start up and...
Kind of like clockwork sort of stuff?
Kind of, yeah. if you stayed long enough, you could see a lot of them doing their jobs.
Huh.
That's the way I thought of it.
That's cool.
But that one was kind of cool. And then I could go on and on because there are so many different countries, but Brazil was a real highlight because they were featuring a film that was made about these different dance troupes. And there's a bit of a storyline going on, but the really interesting thing, I feel like you would blaze right past it at first if you just walked in and looked at the posters, was that a lot of the dancers in these troupes were either gender fluid or like non-binary conforming.
Oh, okay.
So the longer you stayed and watched, the more you were like, interesting, I'm watching bodies, mostly black bodies in motion. And then I'm like, oh, I'm not sure what their gender is or sex assignment, you know? Doesn't matter. It's dancing.
Yeah.
It was very lively and pretty fun. And then, so Brazil was a highlight. There were interesting things going on in Greece. It was kind of a toss-up. There were three. Oh, Russia. Russia was insane. Like, I first walked in and I thought, oh, it's really austere. And it has like sculptures that remind me of pictures I've seen of Moscow and Kremlin and whatever. But then you went a little deeper and some of these artists had done kind of like the art that I'm looking at right now in your studio, dude. Like a sort of a mashup of things that looked very like bright electronic colors representing things from the Cold War, but also contemporary Russia. And there was this whole sort of storyline going on that was, they're representing the Hermitage. I don't know how you say that. A big museum where people go in Russia and take what they want or, you know, pay respect to the past. And it's been part of society for a long time. But this is like a modern take by these different artists. So we got to the basement because the Russian pavilion is huge. It's actually, it was 2 stories. I don't know if it's always that way or they built it in because they rotate and change around these things every time there's a biennale. Like the inside, the interior can be completely different every 2 years. The guy, whoever the artist was that had the whole basement space, he works on mostly plywood, but he had created these giant room length, they were like paintings on a dolly system, and they would slide across the floor from one wall to the other. And while they were doing that, they would reveal things that were on the wall behind them. It was all painted and kind of black and kind of dreary, but also a little bit like rough around the edges, like naive art, kind of. And then on one side of the room, there were these dancers, but they're really, again, like they're plywood cutouts, right? So flat, attached to some kind of a rail system. And their dance was at a certain time, like every 15 minutes, they would start up and they would slide up their rail and then drop back down. And it was, again, like many different members of the societies, but just their backside. You can only see like the women's long hair, and they're like, some of them were young girls with short dresses or whatever, guys with little top hats. And then they would reveal things hiding behind them or in front of them. Like a little skull and crossbones or like a naked nymph. And there was a lot of signs that said like, mind your children or hold on to your children. And all these red lights. So you got very disoriented. It felt like if you were encountered suddenly by an ambulance. Wow. But it's a dance performance or a cabaret. I don't know. It was really odd and really awesome at the same time. So that was a highlight.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. And then I saw so much art in 2 days that I actually became like very inundated or saturated, I guess, and felt like now I just need fresh air and I just want to sit in a cafe and drink an Aperol Spritz and like and watch people pass by and not think about art because it can be very heavy sometimes.
Yeah.
But it was fun. Then I got this whole tour of Italy where we stayed in different places. Mostly I was in Tuscany at Tenuta di Spinocchia, and I was doing this art and writing and drawing and silent walking meditation workshop that Angela Ellsworth and Tanya Catan do every 2 years, topography of memory. And so that was intense too. Tuscany was beautiful. We had sunny days and rainy days altering almost every other day. Got to return to Siena, got to be in Florence again, but just for a minute. And then I went to Bologna on my own. Do you know much about that city?
No.
This was a revelation. Bologna, Italy. is a totally rock city.
Oh,
I had
yeah?
no idea.
Huh.
I had no idea. So people, before I left, told me, oh, yeah, you have one day, one night in Bologna. Okay, all right, go check it out. My friend Anne Block, hi, Anne, in LA, if you're out there listening, she said, tell me what you think, Jenna, because people either love Bologna or they hate it. And I kind of get why she said that, because it's smallish and on the outskirts, pretty beat up. Like, it's a pretty rough city. But when you get into it, there's a lot of cultural sites, not too many tourists, which I appreciate. Fair amount of university students. That's always nice. But I went to the Modern Art Museum, and they had this exhibit going on, and it was about Bologna circa 72 to 85. And they had like a really like punk and new wave, amazing underground rock scene. Like they had this collective called Radio Alice, and they were musicians and like DJs and people that were doing funky stuff with art. And they had just a whole bunch of shows. There were videos playing of these Italian rock groups that only lasted, I guess, in that short period of time, but they were all really good. Like a lot of the early electronic stuff, it would have fit in on the radio here in a heartbeat in that time span. But then some of the punk underground stuff would have fit in with the punk scene also. So it was like Bologna is on the map, kind of like a city like San Francisco or New York, who have this underground scene, but not many people know about it because it's Bologna, Italy, and not everyone in the world speaks Italian, unfortunately. But anyway, I'll show you some photos, or maybe I can send them to you for our site, because I haven't
updated that thing in a long time.
It was awesome. That's okay. We can post this summer.
It could go on, I don't know, Instagram or something.
I went to a live free music festival outdoors that night, and I hung out with a bunch of locals, and we danced to electronic music, and there were these great like video projections going on. I was like, this is nuts. It was really fun.
That's cool.
So, and then I made my way up to Venice. So yeah, so that was my trip in a nutshell. That was the highlights.
Did you learn Italian at all?
I can't even say a little.
No? Yeah.
I was just getting by with my basic Spanish, but adding an O to the end of words.
Well, like, that's the thing, right? Is
Dove il treno?
Supposedly, if you know a Romance language, you can kind of at least understand it if it's spoken to you a little bit, right?
Yeah. The bases are similar. Cognates, is that what they call them?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was because I could understand people, but a lot of the time I'd roll up and be like, "Le parla inglese?" And they did. So
gotcha.
I got by. But Italy is wonderful, and I can't wait to go back. I'm going to spend more time in Venice next time.
Okay.
So I can explore
the
city. I watched a lot of movies on planes.
Yeah.
What did you do the last 2 weeks? I haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been kind of hectic. I'm trying to think of what. Oh, yeah, that's right. I did. So there were a couple of things. I think I did. I sat out at the Herb Museum for Hoot and Waddle. That was interesting.
Oh yeah, I saw photos.
Yeah, that was fun.
Was it like a First Friday kind of situation?
Sort of. It was just like an open Saturday.
So was there music and stuff?
There was a DJ.
Yeah.
And then there were a bunch of vendors and things, and I don't know. I had mixed feelings about it. It seemed kind of busy. It just seems like they're trying to drum up some attendance too. Like they're trying to figure out. I think they have a relatively new director of programming or something, and they've gone through a lot of personnel changes lately.
Who's the director of programming?
I'm not going to remember his name at all. I do not remember.
I know some people at the.
But he's got a thick New York accent, whatever.
Oh, okay.
His name is.
So he's a cool guy.
Yeah, well, and I had met him at, they'd had a table out at the vendor fair for Desert Nights Rising Stars. We met there, and then that's kind of how we exchanged contact information, and ended up going over to that. Then this last Sunday, Jason Kyle and I did the live What the Fork at the the Zia pop-up shop.